You know what every man hero franchise needs? A female who can do the same thing, and that's what the Mighty Thor and the Thor titles did up in the 700s a short while ago with Jane Foster. As much as folks like to put Marvel up on a pedestal for being progressive with this title, I'd like to point out a particular title that did it before. Way before.
By the power of Grayskull!
For the honor of Grayskull!
Sorry, Marvel, DC beat you to the punch. Again, just like they did with Wonder Woman in the theaters. In our previous entry, we talked about the Jason Aaron run on Thor, God of Thunder, and the idea of the everyman introduced in Gore the God Butcher, the guy who continually prays to the gods, who consistently let him down, and the chance meeting with a wounded god granting him ability. At the end of this, Thor amends his ways and visits the people and creatures across the galaxy who are prisoners, the poor, and even shows up amidst a protest to shut down the arguments against the gods. And one of his stops is at the house of Jane Foster, his former lover. Except, he finds out she has terminal cancer. The Thor God of Thunder titles end in 2014, and it picks up with the Thor title a year later, and we are introduced to Jane Foster again, still with the debilitating condition. She's given a magical treatment to deal with her cancer, though. Also, after the events of Thor God of Thunder and the consequences of Gore the God Butcher's influence, Thor was left unworthy to wield Mjolnir. He also loses an arm. The hammer is unresponsive to Odin, who chides the hammer for not listening to him who had originally put the enchantment on it. So Mjolnir lays dormant on the moon while destruction is laid waste to Asgard, without Thor or any of the other heroes being able to use it. And for reasons, the hammer seeks out Jane Foster, who takes it up, along with the speech and fighting style she's seen of her former lover, in a new form. A helmet she wears masks her identity well enough, and she sports blonde hair and a more powerful physique than her cancer-riddled body. However, in taking up the form of Thor, she ends up advancing the spread of her cancer cells and undoing the magic holding back the disease. So whenever she reverts back to her human form, she's drawn as a weaker and more emaciated form due to the virus spreading throughout her body. Anyone unfamiliar with Jane Foster, she is introduced as the love interest to Thor Odinson way back in his Dr. Donald Blake days. She also served as his nurse assistant as the Asgardian played his alter ego off as crippled. She has played the secondary part to Thor Odinson since 1962 in Journey into Mystery number 84. Despite her love for the Asgardian, she had married a human named Keith Kincaid and had a child with him, enjoying civilian life for a short while. However, for unknown reasons, Jane Foster divorced Kincaid. The custody of their son, Jimmy, went to Keith, and then they both died in a car accident. Apparently, it was not worth more than a mention in the Mighty Thor number 704. Adding to the tragic backstory of how her civilian life was a cantankerous mess, her mother died of the same disease she's now facing. Her father died of a heart condition and having worked 2 jobs to support her studies in medical school. It's a weird tale interlaced with comic book tropes of consequences averted, like death and disease, no longer being issues for Jane Foster because magic and superpowers. The consequences first introduced in Thor God of Thunder are reversed in the Thor title with magic to cure her of her cancer, but the cancer comes back when she gets the hammer, and she dies as a consequence of using the hammer too many times, and the cancer spreads to other parts of her body. But wait! There's a way of bringing her back from death using more magic, this time being the energies stored within Mjolnir, the thing that really caused her to die in the first place, to put her back in her mortal body. And this time around, she's given the branding of the Valkyrie, and now she's brought up that lineup. She also appeared as female Thor for Secret Wars number 2 as a member of God Emperor Doom's Thor Corps police force lineup in 2015. And despite some people having an issue with a moniker female Thor, That's what she's named in the comics. And Natalie Portman Instagrammed out the name as well. So if you're going to make a statement about a character, make sure it's a consistent narrative across the board. Taika. It's a weird comic because, along with Thor finding himself unworthy of wielding Mjolnir, he gives up the name and calls himself Odinson. Which is weird because it's like me no longer calling myself Donald. And Jane Foster, being Thor, just reeks of Rey taking up the name of Skywalker thing. It doesn't line up with the comics because by that logic, everyone who's picked up the hammer should be given the name of Thor, Captain America, Magneto, Beta Ray Bill, Red Hulk, Colossus, Throg, Eric Masterson, and to be fair, some of them were known as Thor to some extent, or at least identified with a group who carried the title. Others through extenuating circumstances, or through manipulation of the forces around them, still had this underlying idea that they kept their titles, their names. No one refers to Beta Ray Bill as Thor, nor do they call Captain America Thor. They call Thor Odinson Thor. And that's the thing that bothered me about this series of comics. Yes, I know comics are weird. But if you want to retain your audience, I think it's important to not confuse your audience with the minutiae of that kind of detail. The fantastical isn't enough in a printed media to suspend disbelief. And the artwork of Esad Ribic is great, but don't get me wrong, it isn't enough to get me around the mental gymnastics required to navigate my way around the Rey Palpatine maneuver.
Rey Skywalker.
To be fair to the title, there are some really good elements to her story that I think helps me get around some of the other lesser points of contention with her background. However, I think at some point she should have been put to rest after swinging Mjolnir around the last time to defeat Random Beast number 3482. To bring her back from the brink for the umpteenth time feels like a cop-out for any sacrifice she made and consequences to her decisions to do so. But comics, right? But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the female Thor, or Mighty Thor, or Jane Foster, or whatever title she's taken up nowadays. Leave a comment below or let's talk about it on social media. Don't forget to smash the like button and follow Bounty Into Comics for the latest takes on all the pop culture nerdy news out there. Until next time.